So excited to convene this conversation about give you the inside scoop about what it's like under the dome into the life of a state legislator. I think it's going to be a great conversation. So I'm Gabby Goldstein. I'm one of our co-founders at Sister District. We're so happy to be here with our friends at Red Wine and Blue to have this conversation, bring our communities together to learn more about the importance of states, state legislatures, and what these folks do all day at the Capitol. So, wild day in the news. I'm watching primary returns tonight in some really key states, Maryland, West Virginia, et cetera. And, there's so much going on at the federal level. It can be hard to turn our gaze down ballot, but the truth is that our state legislatures are so, so important. They're increasingly important and increasingly powerful, but also somewhat mysterious, a little bit unknown, less known what goes on there. And so that's why it's so fun and important to have this conversation tonight. So quick overview of the session. I'm just going to say a few words about Sister District, then introduce our incredible speakers, and then moderate a conversation about, just as I said, what state lawmakers do, what their jobs are like, what surprises them about the work, what keeps them engaged and keeps them motivated and inspired. We'll have some time for Q&A. I think we will have some time, and then we'll wrap up. So just briefly, it's about Sister District. I see some friends from Sister District on the line. So some of you might know, but our mission is to build progressive power in state legislatures. And we do that by helping to elect great state lawmakers and help them succeed once they're in office. And, we do this because we started this organization because we saw a gap in organizing capacity and resources going to folks running at this level of the ballot and serving in this level of government. And I always say that progressives are tardy to the party when it comes to paying attention to state legislatures. Of course, conservatives have just been masterful for generations at incubating their regressive policies at the state level and spreading them around. So we really focus on this level of the ballot. Of course, this is a policy pipeline, leadership pipeline. Half of all presidents started in their state legislatures. Half of all members of Congress started in their state legislatures. So many governors, including Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan, and so many others started in their state legislatures. And so, 8 years later, incredibly, our work is more important than ever. Of course, we see the Supreme Court returning civil rights and liberties back to states, from Dobbs and abortion to in the environmental protections and redistricting, all the rest. So, our work continues to be important, but we can't just be against things, right? We have to be for things too. And our beautiful blue states really show us what's possible. And we'll talk a little bit about what we're seeing in those in states like Michigan. So with so much at stake at the top of the ballot, it's really important to remember that we have to look at down ballot too. And so it's really exciting to gather and learn about these incredible state lawmakers, what they do and why it matters to all of us. So with that, let me tell you about our panelists. First, we have Georgia Representative Regina Lewis Ward. She is a native of Brooklyn, New York. And after working for more than 20 years as a manager with NYC Transit, she retired to Georgia and ran for state ledge and currently serves in District 115. And she is on a number of committees, including agriculture, consumer affairs, banks and banking, interstate cooperation, which is a really interesting one, and energy, utilities, telecommunications committees. She's partnered with Gordon State College Foundation to establish an empowerment scholarship to help address the underrepresentation of African-American women in public office. And she's also a beloved Sister District alum and member of our Purple District Network for progressive frontline lawmakers. Next, we have North Carolina Representative Diamond Staten Williams. She has served as a North Carolina state rep since 2022. She was first elected in 2017 as councilwoman for the town of Harrisburg, making her the first African-American woman to serve on that council. She's also a healthcare professional, currently employed as a director of the outpatient and community care management department for Atrium Health. And we're also thrilled to have her as a member of our Purple District Network. Last but not least, we have Michigan Senator Winnie Brinks. She is the Michigan Senate Majority Leader. She is the first woman to ever hold that position in the Michigan Senate, as well as the first woman to represent Grand Rapids in the Michigan Senate since Eva McCall Hamilton was elected in 1920, which was a very long time ago. She really focuses on accessible, clean water, of course, a perennial issue in Michigan that always in our minds, right? And other policy passions include improving equity in maternal health care, reproductive rights, reducing prescription drug costs, and helping uplift local communities and organizations. Before serving in the Senate, she served in the House for 3 terms, and before that was a caseworker at The Source, helping businesses and nonprofits improve workplaces and retain employees. And she is also a beloved Sister District alum. So these incredible women bring an array of professional experiences, accomplishments, personal experiences, identities into their service in the legislature. And they also serve in really different contexts in certain ways, right? Legislatures are similar in some ways, but they also vary quite a bit. Senator Brinks is in a blue trifecta where Democrats control both chambers of the legislature and the governorship, whereas in North Carolina, Representative Staten Williams is in a divided government where there's a Democratic governor, but Republican-controlled legislature, and unfortunately, supermajority in both chambers. And then Representative Lewis Ward in Georgia is in a red trifecta state where the Republicans control both chambers and the governorship. Other ways that these legislatures are different, some of them are part-time, whereas the Michigan legislature is full-time. So many different factors that contribute to their experiences in the legislature. We really wanted to make sure to invite lawmakers from different contexts into the conversation so that we could learn from their varied experiences. So let's dive in and learn more. So I wanted to just start things off and sort of at a big picture level, what is a typical day like? What goes on in the legislature? You show up for work, right? You park. Hopefully you have your own parking space. But what happens when you show up on a typical day? What's on your plate? What keeps you busy? How does it work on the day-to-day? So maybe Senator Brinks, you could start off, and then Representative Lewis Ward, and then maybe Representative Staten Williams.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be with you guys. And it's so fun to see people from all across the nation. I've been watching the chat. It's great to see the enthusiasm, and boy, do we need it this year. So thank you to everybody out there in advance for all the things you're going to do to make sure that Democrats get elected in state legislatures across our country. How our days go, they're very busy. We are a full-time legislature, as you mentioned, and we are really, really busy when we are in session. And it roughly follows a school calendar with a short break for spring break and a fall break, as well as a little bit longer summer break, particularly in an election year. So we work in session 3 days a week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and on Mondays, Fridays, and Saturdays and Sundays and evenings. Whatever your district needs, you're doing that kind of thing. But I usually leave the house about 7 a.m. and work it takes me about an hour to get to work. So I've got about 2 hours in the car. So I do phone calls and work to and from. Occasionally I call my family and catch up with what's going on with them when I'm on my way home. But yeah, your workday is filled with, I don't have committees anymore. I used to have committees, but since I'm the leader now, I don't serve on committees, which I'm a little bit surprised to hear myself say I kind of miss sometimes, because those can keep you really busy. But I really did like digging into the policy and really knowing an issue by heart. Now I got to read memos and all of that. But there's a lot of committee meetings. There's meetings with constituents, with different stakeholder groups. So in any given day, you'll meet with 6 or 8 different people on different bills and different issues. So it's always a great variety of things. Lots of time with staff, trying to figure out strategy. I meet with the leadership team every week. I, of course, do off-site activities as well, because you can't take your eye off the ball You have to constantly be maintaining the fundraising operation and keeping your eye on the next election and other elections for people around you. So this year, our Senate is not on the ballot, but our state house is. And so it's an incredibly important priority for us to do everything that we can, both legislatively as well as offsite, to support them in their efforts to get reelected. Because there's a lot of things that we can't do unless we have this trifecta and keep it. So that's incredibly important to us. And of course, we have a targeted US Senate race. The presidential goes without saying. Plus, we have a number of key congressional races in the state of Michigan. So we, in our various districts, overlap with each of them in some way. And so we are constantly looking at this, not just as our caucus and our districts that we hold as Democrats in the state Senate, but we are also looking at it from a bigger perspective so that we can make sure that we are, winning and keeping these seats for Democrats and for the people that we serve.
Representative Lewis Ward, do you want to tell us about a day in your life? What is it like in Georgia when you show up at that dome? What goes on?
So I want to say thank you very much first to Sister District and as well to Red Wine and Blue. We really appreciate the opportunity to join this panel this evening. And it would be lovely if we had a parking space, a designated parking space. Unfortunately, we have a designated level that we can park on. However, if you're not there early enough, you still won't get your favorite spot. Yeah, in Georgia, only leadership has a designated parking spaces. Unlike Michigan, Georgia is, we're considered part-time legislators. We're only in session 40 days, and it doesn't have to be 40 consecutive days. It's 40 days between January and roughly around the end of March or the beginning of April. And no day is the same. I would say every day is an individual day. And I wish I can say that I leave my house at a certain time every day. I'm on 4 different committees, and whatever time the speaker says that we should gavel in, that's the time that we have to be inside the chamber. However, our committee chairs seem to schedule our committee meetings around the times that we're in the chamber. So for example, if we have to gavel in, maybe let's just say 10 a.m., we may have an 8 o'clock or even a 7 o'clock committee meeting that we have to attend first, or even a caucus meeting. And the day is just spent doing whatever is expected of us. It could be meeting at the ropes with constituents or other organizations. It could mean meeting with your staff, because you also have to talk to them to let them know what you're expecting of them for that particular day. It could be meeting with organizations, attending events that are outside the Capitol. We have several venues that are in the vicinity on Capitol Hill that we have to leave the Capitol to attend. So maybe through lunch or during recess, we have to run over to the other building to say hello to some people who have gathered there. Or we may meet somebody in our office. We may meet with the lobbyists, or a lobbyist may just stop us and say, hey, this is something that's coming up. I want you to take a look at it. Then there's the evenings, right? In the evenings, we tend to meet amongst ourselves, dinners to discuss legislation that's happening, or just to network and get to know one another. That's while we're in session. So when you're outside of session, after session ends, it's more doing what the community would like for you to do. It's attending events, attending ribbon cuttings, attending groundbreaking ceremonies, attending luncheons, breakfasts, graduations now. At this time of year, everyone is graduating. So it's just doing whatever you're called to do. And while I say it's part-time, we're only in session part-time, but the work continues every day, and it changes every day.
every day is varied. There is no canonical day in the life, but it's incredible to hear the array of different things that are on your plate, especially for a part-time legislature. What about you, Representative Staten Williams? As you're also in a part-time legislature, right? How did the day look like for you?
So it's similar to Representative Brinks and Representative Lewis Ward. While we are part-time, we have in the odd year our long session. Long session is supposedly supposed to last 6 months or less. And currently we're in short session in this even numbered year. And we just started I want to say 3 weeks ago. And hopefully it will end in June, but we'll see. But long session last year was my first year, and we went from the very last week of January all the way until November. And I live 2.5 hours away from the state's capital, so I have to come up and drive up every week about 2.5 hours and stay from Tuesday to Thursday or Friday morning, just depending on what's going on, and be here part-time here in Raleigh, which is exciting. And I spend a lot of time talking to advocacy groups, lobbyists, just trying to figure out exactly what's going on and what really needs attention, answering emails from constituents, especially those emails that are, can you help me with a foster care issue? Can you help me get a birth certificate for a child that I've adopted from foster care? So some of those different things, but I see in the chat where people are asking, like, what is the pay? This is part-time pay. So we get paid $13,000 a year, in addition to ad valorem kind of pay, where we get paid for mileage and to be able to stay here. It's $104 a day, but I don't know anywhere where you can stay for $104 in a hotel. So I'm here with my daughter, who lives in Raleigh, usually Tuesday through Thursday. Hopefully she doesn't get tired of me and kicks me out. But that's what happens for kids. They want to make sure that they have their own life. But I enjoy it. I'm getting to meet a lot of different people and making sure that we get connected for the things that are important for other people. And just like Representative Lewis Ward said, even when I'm back home, I spend a lot of time going to different events, talking to people and setting up different meetings, because you want to build good relationships within the community as well as with your other representatives and senators with that throughout the state, because I again can't move a lot of legislation by myself. I need to have cooperation and collaboration with people if they find it that is important for them and their constituents as well. So we want to make sure that we're at least opening up dialogue. While it may not get further than my lips to their ears, hopefully with other advocacy groups coming behind to speak to them and make sure that they are understanding what the needs are of their communities, we can get some things done. But overall, I've had a good first year. I'm still here.
Thank
Gabby,
you for staying here.
I was going to say add that also during the off, when we're out of session, we have the opportunity to travel to meet other legislators in other states, attending conventions, attending classes where we could sharpen our policy making skills, and also learn about what's happening in other states who have been leaders passing other policies, something that we may be able to adopt in our own state. So I think that's, for me, I think that's one of the things that I enjoy very much when we're out of session, is meeting other legislators in other states and finding out what they're doing for their state.
I agree with that as well. I've reached out to some ladies in Philadelphia, Wisconsin, and I think it's always good to just hear different perspectives, especially in states where things are working, where people are actually working together and you're able to get things done, and know that, you know, even though you may hear wild and crazy things going on, some people may be reasonable and will pick up your calls. And if they pick it up, I'm grateful, because That's one thing that's off of my to-do list for people in the community, where I don't have to have my name on it. It doesn't have to say Diamond did it, but at least someone can see that something is happening.
Oh, I was just, I was thinking about what we do all day, and we spend a lot of time just talking, right? And it's trying to catch our colleagues to convince them of our perspective. It's on the phone. I can't tell you how much time I spend on the phone. And then it just working in session, and voting and working through just the procedural things, making sure we're following the rules, making sure we're ready for all those challenges. So it's never boring. There's always, a dozen or more topics every day, or things to learn about. There's legal issues, there's all kinds of stuff. So, if you're out there and were ever thinking, wondering if you're cut out for public service, if you are curious and really enjoy learning, that's a huge help. If you're really willing to work hard, that makes a huge difference. And if you're really willing to listen to people and have hard conversations with them, but still maintain that relationship, that goes such a long ways.
Yeah. I mean, what we're hearing from you all is that, first of all, even in places where this is considered part-time work, it's not. This is full-time. Ooh, I did not start this.
The security is not that secure, so the host should check the security ASAP.
Oh, yeah.
Yep, sorry, this is a new one. I've not had that before.
Huh.
I realized I could use the whiteboard, so.
Okay, so in any case, what we're hearing is, even places where this is where you're serving in a part-time legislature, it's not part-time, right? Especially when you think about the nights and the weekends and the, all of the time that you're spending in the community, in addition to the work that you're doing under the dome, it adds up to way more than a full-time job, even if you have a full-time job too. And I think that that's something that a lot of people don't know. I mean, Michigan is only one of a handful of states that has a full-time legislature. California, New York, there's a handful. But a lot of states have part-time, so-called part-time legislatures, and absolutely the pay is reflective of a part-time job, or even less than a part-time job, right, for full-time work. And that really affects who can serve, right? And I'd be curious, what the composition of your chambers looks like in terms of, especially in states where there's, part-time work for full-time pay. And there are states I mentioned in the chat, Nevada, Texas, that only need every other year part-time. But how does that affect the composition of who can serve? I would imagine that it would really shift the demographic of who has the ability to serve in this sort of context. But would be really curious, especially from Diamond and Regina, to hear your experiences in those part-time legislatures.
Well, Gabby, almost everyone has a job outside of the legislature. They may take leave for the 40 days, or they work it out however they can. But most people do have jobs. And our legislature, we have 236 between the Senate and the House. And it's a total of 159 men. Lawyers, doctors, teachers, and I think women is about 77 women in the legislature. Yeah, and yeah, it does impact, the salary does impact who can serve. And one of the differences between having a traditional job and being a legislator is that in a traditional job, you kind of know when you're going to get a salary increase, right? You work, and hopefully every year you'll get an annual review, or you'll get a labor agreement increase. So from time to time, well, from year to year, that your salary may go up. In the legislature, this year Georgia was fortunate enough to get a raise, but for a long time they have not had a raise. And I'm quite sure that they're among the 50 legislatures, everyone is not getting a raise every year. So you're working and you know, the cost of living is going up and your salary is staying the same.
Working in the legislature for $13,000 a year is not meant for people who are working families, working adults. So and I'll just challenge everyone to go and look at our state's website, look at our legislature, and you can tell who's in charge. It is not people who look like me. It is not primarily women. It is people who are either retired or independently wealthy, who can afford to put $13,000 up in a 401k or a 457B. That's not me. I have used that $13,000 to pay for gas, pay for lodging, pay for clothes, and all the things that go along with running up and down just to get new tires for my car. So that's something to consider. So if you think about what how the legislature is being run and how the state is being run, you can tell that this is not a position that many want working families and working people to have, because it doesn't benefit us. It doesn't benefit the wants and needs of the majority of the state. So I'll just leave that up to you guys and let you do your homework, because we're here and we're going to continue to fight for working families and to get more working people in places and positions of power, because that's what's important. We're doing the day-to-day work and we know what families need most often.
Included in some legislators will have staff, personal assistants assigned to them. Georgia doesn't give us that, nor do they give us any allowance specifically for staff. We have an admin, and she works for 8 of us. And so that's very challenging for one person to work for 8 different legislators. So if you want to build your constituency services or your team, you have to pay for that yourself. And
That's incredible.
Yeah, that's why I at least have a legislative aide, and she's paid for by the legislative body in the state, which is important. And one of the reasons why I picked her is because she is a former county manager. So here in North Carolina, if you retire from one position, you can come back and work again for the state, which is important. And I needed that experience. I told people when I first came, like, I need a mother. I don't know what I'm doing. So I need somebody that's gonna hold my hand and tell me, like, you need to go to this office to get this bill draft, or you need to talk to finance to see if this is even possible before you take it to someone else to try to get them to push it along. So I needed that kind of support. So I have someone, and I'm grateful for her. Her name is Loria Williams. So if you ever email me, tell her thank you, because she is awesome.
I'm really counting my blessings here in Michigan, because as a full-time legislature, we have staff. A typical Senate office will have 2 to 3 people who work full-time for them, sometimes a little bit more depending on the workload. And those folks make more than we do often, not all of them, but a lot of them do. And so they're really professional, and they bring an incredible amount of value to the work that we do. And it's a career then that you can really build a life around. And as for pay, a typical, House member or Senate member not in leadership will be paid around $72,000. We work a lot of hours. So compared to what many of our members were doing, in other careers, sometimes it's not as much, but for a lot of people, it's a very livable wage. We have increasing, but tend to have a more reasonable cost of living than many other places like the coasts here in the Midwest. So it's actually something that is accessible for a lot of folks to be able to take the job and to really commit to it, the time that it requires, without having to really lean on family members or spouse to bring home the money that you need to pay the mortgage and do all the things you need to do. But so we feel very fortunate that way. But I will say, in terms of the makeup of the legislature, we had, when I ran for Senate, so I'd been in the House for 6 years when I decided to run for Senate. And at that time, there were more women in my household than there were in the Senate Democratic caucus. And so I have 3 daughters, full disclosure. So, there's 4 of us. But we we have since then, when we achieved that was the election that we achieved parity for the first time ever for any caucus, male and female members of the Democratic Senate caucus. We had 8 and 8. And then when we took the majority, we now have a majority women caucus. So for the first time in history. So we're really excited about that. And not only that, we have the most diverse caucus in the history of the state. We've got a diversity in age. We've got several members in their 30s, in their 40s. I think the largest group is in their 50s. That's the one I'm part of. And then we have a couple of folks in their 60s, and that's our 20 members. So we've got a pretty good spread for age to bring those different life experiences to the table. We also have I'm pretty sure this is true over in the House too. But of the 38 Senate members, there are only 3 African-American Senate members right now. They're all women, and they're only Democrats. So as long as Democrats are in charge, those are folks who have gavels in their hand, who actually determine agendas for committees, who make decisions about what bills get heard, that kind of thing. I have the privilege of appointing the very first Black woman in the history of our state to be our appropriations chair in the Senate. Our floor leader in the Senate is an Indian American man. That's the first time an Indian American man has ever held that position. Our Senate President pro tem is the first openly gay senator ever to serve in the legislature. So here we are, able to do things like that and really put folks in key positions because the Democrats have the gavel. None of that would have happened if we were not able to take the majority. So it's just one of the things that is kind of a bummer about being a leader is that you don't get to do all the things, but it's so gratifying to be able to empower the people around you who bring such a diverse set of experiences to the table, and to really not just have a seat at the table while other things are happening around you, even if you have some say in it, but to be able to say what's going to happen, to truly have power to decide where dollars are spent, to decide what bills get hearings, what gets passed, what gets put on the agenda. So it's just, I should also say, I mean, I'm just thrilled to be here. I understand, my friends in other states who have worked in the minority. I worked in a red trifecta in the minority for several years, and then in divided government with a Democratic governor and a Republican legislature. And now it's just an incredible opportunity to be able to work in a blue trifecta. But it's a really slim majority in both chambers. We have 56-54 in the House and 20-18 in the Senate. So we can't lose a single vote if we're doing something that is, just purely Democratic. So we have our work cut out for us, but I will take those challenges any day over the challenges that my friends here from other states are sharing. So, but yeah, I want to give you guys hope because a couple of things really helped us. We had a nonpartisan redistricting commission that drew lines that had partisan fairness, and simply having that partisan fairness helped propel such a diverse group of people into the legislature and into the majority. That was one thing. We had abortion on the ballot 2 years ago, and that was a huge motivator when the Dobbs decision was leaked, and that really brought out younger, more diverse voters who really started to realize what was at stake. So if there's any way, and I'm not sure what, how things feel on the ground in your states, but those two things were incredibly motivating for our electorate and really helped us win majorities and really be in a position to do this good policy. So, and all along the way, folks like Sister District have been supporting us, in our targeted seats to make sure that we had resources and volunteers, and they really took the long view. So it was really important to help us build that power incrementally over several years and a few cycles to get where we are. So there's hope.
There is so much hope, and Michigan is such a bright light for us in so many respects. And just to sort of circle back to what we heard from this part of the conversation, the ability, I'm just popping into the chat, there's a really great resource at Rutgers. There's a center called the Center for American Women in Politics, and they keep really interesting records of how many women serve in state legislatures. And there is a strong correlation. As a social scientist, I will not say causation, but strong correlation between Democratic control of the legislature and the proportion of lawmakers who are women. 9 of the top 10 states have Democratic control of the legislature, and we're going to get Arizona this year for the 10th one. But and all 10 of the bottom 10 states are Republican trifectas. But again, having representation, it's not just in name only, it's because folks who come from diverse backgrounds and experiences bring to the table such a richness of life and an understanding of the communities that are often most impacted by state level policies, which is why it's so important that we're fighting for that beautiful reflective legislature that a place like Michigan has been able to work toward. And pay is a huge part of this. And just to say the quiet part out loud, so many legislatures are still predominantly old white men, and that cannot change unless we raise pay for state lawmakers. We cannot really turn that around without better resources in terms of staffing. Many legislatures, folks serving in the legislature don't have a single staffer, not one staffer, 0. How can you really work towards the agenda that we all want with resources that thin? Well, they're doing it, right? But there are structural barriers to being able to serve in state office that we collectively need to address. And it's amazing to see places like Michigan tackle some of those structural barriers. And so, I think we have a long list of questions, and we're going to get to some of those. At 5:20, I'm cutting us off, and we're going to lightning round of Q&A because there's some great questions. But I did want to just ask, putting your cap back, and I wanted to say one other thing about abortion being on the ballot. I just want to shout out Diamond, who was able to, when she won her race, it was what, less than 500 votes, something very
29.
How many?
629.
629 votes, and it staved off the supermajority in North Carolina, which meant that Diamond was responsible for abortion being able to still exist in North Carolina. And then there was a turncoat Democrat who changed her affiliation from Democratic to Republican and was able to deliver a veto-proof supermajority to the Republicans in North Carolina. And so, but I wanted to just shout Diamond out for that razor-thin margin that shows how incredibly important every vote is at this level of the ballot. And your win there was incredible and incredibly important. So I just wanted to share that. But one thing that I did want to ask you all before we move into Q&A is, what surprised you most when you first started in the legislature, or maybe even now? What surprises your friends and family when you talk about it? Or what surprises folks? What do you wish people knew about serving in the legislature that folks might not know and might be one of those, really? That's a thing, or that's how that works? Would be so curious for any thoughts on that. And whoever wants to jump in to start off the conversation.
I guess I'll start. For me, there were so many surprises, right? I was formerly a city council person, and while the job overall is kind of the same in terms of you passing legislation and things to help the people in the community, however, when you go inside the chamber, it's totally different. I did not realize, so it's structured and unstructured, if that makes sense. We have an agenda, we follow the agenda, that's the structured part, but nobody is listening, right? It's like so routine and robotic, and everyone is having side conversations, and you kind of know in the back of your head what's going to happen next, and you follow along. So that was a surprise to me, because me, a teacher, in the classroom, everything is quiet, students are listening, and I kind of expected that inside the chamber, but that's totally the opposite. So that was one thing that really surprised me. I had to become a very flexible person, because I had mentioned prior, nothing is the same every day. Something else that really surprised me was the number of legislative maneuvers that can happen to a bill. I had a bill that was passed in the House. It went over to the Senate. The Senate gutted it and replaced it with different language, had nothing to do with the original language in the bill. And when that bill came back, had to come back to the House, we anticipated it maybe being heard on the House floor, which it did not. So over the break, my bill sat with my number and legislation or content wording that had nothing to do with what it was originally for. We went back in session and they changed it again. And so all of these manipulative, well, I'll say maneuvers that happen to bills was a total surprise to me. I had no idea you can do so many different things to try to get your bills passed in the legislature. So those are two things that, really, really surprised me. And I'm sure the other ladies maybe have experienced something similar.
I agree with that. I think that was the biggest thing. Like, you can actually just take all of my words and hard work out of here, still use the number of this bill and do whatever you want. Like make it make sense. It should be against the law, but apparently it's not.
Yeah, we have some rules about that in Michigan. Like if it changes the original intent of the bill, or it's something that's not addressed in that section of the law, then they can't just swap it out completely. So I'm sure that it's because of frustrating experiences like you described that we have those rules. But I would say something that surprised me is how many different things you really have to get up to speed on. And it's almost impossible to really know all of those things very thoroughly. So you have to figure out who are the experts in your caucus, especially, and on staff, who truly understand that policy. And you have to establish a level of trust so that you can feel comfortable voting in the way that they recommend, or finding the answers that you need. And you have to be pretty scrappy to do that. And the answers that you need for your district might be different than what somebody else needs for theirs. So understanding how that your individual needs work together with the needs of the rest of the caucus and your agenda as a group to get really good policy done that reflects the needs of the whole state it's a pretty complex thing to try and put something together that goes from introduction by one legislator or a group of legislators, and then to finally get that product all the way across the line successfully by earning the majority of your colleagues' votes is something that is real work. And I think what surprised me is not so much that it's work, but that the general public really doesn't have a great concept of how difficult it is to get policy done. And having a blue trifecta now, people will say, well, you're all Democrats. Why don't you just do this, that, and the other thing? And they have their long list, especially because we haven't had the Senate in 40 years. So we've got 40 years of pent up policy priorities that we're trying to work through. But the fact of the matter is we don't all agree, right? Even those who have a D next to their name, it's not that easy to get it all done. And so somebody will say, well, you have, 3 weeks of session left before the summer break or whatever. It's longer than that, but you know what I mean. And they'll say, you can get all of these things done, right? And it's like, well, if we were going to get a big package done of major policy that has significant impact with all kinds of stakeholders, you should have started that 6 months ago, right? Like those conversations take real time. So I think there's a sense among the general public that we should, quote, just do the right thing. And the fact of the matter is we're working really hard to do the right thing. And it's not as simple as it looks. So that's kind of what surprised me the most.
I mean, it's been amazing to see what you have been able to accomplish in such a short time with this beautiful blue trifecta. But those are fascinating. I mean, Regina, I love the scene of Bedlam, right? Where you just show up at the chamber and there's the side conversations and there's little huddles that are happening all the time. And there is this sort of unstructured nature to session that is not like, as you say, you show up to class and everyone's quiet and there's an agenda that just fills the day. There is a lot of unstructured space and time, which I think is surprising, would be really surprising. And Diamond, the idea that you can just swap in, use the same number because it passed in the House and on a bill, and swap in a completely different bill in its place is wild. I'm so glad Michigan has closed that, and Winnie as well. I mean, truly, herding cats, which now is partially your job, right? Is hard work, and it's different. It's a different type of hard than not. And so those are really interesting and unusual things that you all are grappling with and dealing with. We have some time for lightning round of questions, so I'm going to ask folks to just be really brief with your responses, of course, so that we can get to more of them. And I'm grouping together some questions that have come in into sort of buckets. So one bucket is around, is bipartisanship dead, right? And what do there are extreme factions, right, going on right now. Polarization is real, all the rest. How do you all approach working across the aisle? Is it possible? Is it not possible? Is it worth doing? Any thoughts and reflections on that?
It's possible. You just have to make sure to build a relationship and rapport. And again, like I said earlier, once I know where we have some commonalities, I can hopefully build and drop an idea or say, oh, when I was meeting with the Y, they needed $8 million. So something can get done, because again, this is work that's not about me. It's about all of us.
I would agree that it is possible, and in states like mine, where you have the red trifecta, excuse me, I would recommend it that you do build relationships. That is the only way that you will get anything accomplished. And in these events that we attend and go to, show up, find out how someone else thinks and why they think the way they think. You may be surprised at that. You may have similar experiences, just a different way of achieving maybe the same goal. So yeah, I don't think bipartisanship is dead at all. It's definitely necessary to get things going.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think, really good policy often does take people from both sides of the aisle just to get it done. Within the Democratic Party, we have our whole spectrum of folks from the most progressive furthest left to the most centrist, and it can be difficult to get everybody to agree. Sometimes there's policy where we need a couple of Republican votes, and we can get that because there are a few of them who are in the center as well. So sometimes we just have to choose, like, where's the lane of what's possible with the people that we have in the legislature at this moment in our history. And that was true when I was in the minority as well. You know, the stories that you both tell about working together, you know, finding a way to define what is a win for you and finding colleagues that you can work with. It's a must in the minority. You have to. There are times when in the majority, I can get to 20 and I don't need a Republican. And then the policy is going to look a lot more Democratic than moderate, right? Or more progressive than moderate if I have to keep everybody happy on my side of the aisle. So that's great for me. I'll get good policy for me. But if you are a person in the minority in that position, you then don't have as much input. You don't get a win in that bill. So, you know, the tables have turned from my perspective, but I spent many, many years trying to find ways to work with Republicans. Let them have the credit if they need it, but find a way to make that bill less bad. Find a way to make that bill good for my community in particular, to deliver something that's part of what's in there that will make a difference for my community.
Absolutely. And I mean, you know, working in divided government, there's also the world of working with the governor when you have the governor and finding ways to push policy through the administration. But in any case, these are incredible insights. I'm going to turn things over to Julie in 1 second, but in closing, I would love to just hear in just a couple of sentences, what keeps you all in this work? What keeps you inspired in this wild election year where there's so much at stake? What keeps you grounded and focused on this work?
My kids. I know how important the future is for all of us, and know that the things that are happening now, the seeds that are being planted, I may not, and I definitely know some of the older seasoned people who are in the legislature won't see the fruits of that. So I need to make sure that whatever I'm doing, the future is going to be able to reap the benefits from. So that's what keeps me hopeful and keeps me inspired.
Well, you know, we've already talked about salaries, so we know it's not the salaries that keep us going.
It's not the money.
I think I do it because I think instinctively I have a real passion for listening to my community and really hearing them from their heart, knowing that they depend upon us to try to make their lives better, and you really don't want to let them down, right? So the passion in me that says, yes, you should have healthcare. You should be able to go to the doctor when you're sick, and it should be affordable. You should be able to send your child to a public school, doesn't matter what your zip code is, and they still get an education that they deserve, a good education, without you having to pay. So those are the things that I hear when I'm out in the community. And it's really that, listening to them, that keeps me going every day, trying to make a difference. And hopefully one day we'll get to be like Michigan. I absolutely love what you're doing. I love the fact that you can't swap a bill out. That is fantastic. If we ever become a blue state, that is something that I will definitely push for.
Yeah. There's always hope. You'll get there. I think what gives me hope is much like Regina is talking about, you know, for 20 some years, I worked in nonprofits and in education settings, helping individual students or employees or families really resolve barriers to success at work, at school, wherever, in their personal lives. And those stories come with me to the Capitol every single day. And so many times people who struggle with housing, mental health care, regular health care, it's all the same, but you know what I mean. Child care, transportation just to get through their daily lives. They don't have lobbyists. They don't have people who are sitting in these seats who are looking out for them, from that perspective. Occasionally we do, but most people don't share that experience. So for me to be able to walk alongside of those folks for so long before I was here, that really keeps me going when things get tough in the legislature, or when things get really focused on stuff that doesn't matter, the politics, the silly things, the difficult campaigns, the attack ads that are just brutal and offensive that you have to withstand to get the privilege of sitting in that chair and pushing that button and setting the agenda. So that's really motivational for me. And then my 3 daughters, they're all in their 20s, and my husband's a school teacher. And so we have just really invested our lives in what's next, not just for them, but for everybody else. And we just care deeply about making sure that what we do contributes to making our communities better for the people who will come after us. So it's easy to stay motivated if I just go back to that grounding in the work that I did before I got to the legislature, and there are people opening doors for you and saying, Senator, after you, because I always remember they're only saying that because I have a title and I get to push that button. And as soon as I'm out of there, and all those years before I got there, when I was working in nonprofits and education, and I never made more than $40,000 a year before I came to the legislature, I didn't matter to them then, right? And I don't want to be the kind of legislator that those folks are insignificant for, right?
Right.
So I am very motivated every single day. And when I get exhausted or discouraged, that's what I go back to.
I mean, I'm here watching my 8-month-old on the nap cam and thinking about how we're all, connected in this journey through time. And you're all speaking to the same thing, which is that, you're connected in the chain of folks who are helpers, right? And who want to make the world better and leave it a little better than how you found it. And so I'm so inspired by you all, and so grateful for the work that you're doing. It's so incredibly important. Not easy work, not heralded as much as it should be, but incredibly important to the future of our democracy, to the future that we all want for our kids and grandkids. So thank you so much. I'll pass things over to Julie to close us out.
Okay, well, thank you all so much. And Senator, and all of you, thank you for your work on behalf of our children. My 20-year-old is on her way home from college right now as we speak. So I feel you on that one. You guys will see the love in the chat. So really thank you to our panelists for we already heard about your day. So the fact that you took this extra time to come and hang out with us and explain what you do and the importance of what you do is much appreciated. And there was a lot of love in the chat for that. Thank you to Sister District for organizing this really amazing panel and joining us tonight. Okay, thank you all for joining us, and hope everybody has a fabulous evening.